Welcome to Storyflix Film, where movies are not just watched in a broken bar, they are experienced. Here, we bring you fast, powerful, and engaging movie recaps, turning full films into short, exciting stories without missing the thrill. From action-packed blockbusters to emotional dramas and mind-blowing sci-fi, we break it all down in a way that keeps you hooked till the end. So sit back, relax, and get ready, because every story here is a cinematic journey in minutes. Ang Panday is a 1980 Filipino action fantasy film produced and directed by Fernando Poe Jr., who also stars as the titular character. It is based on the fictional comics character of the same name, created by Carlo J. Caparrasa and illustrated by Steve Gan. 1, 2, 3. The film was followed by 3 sequels, which also featuring Poe's Flavio, namely A Pack the Book Ang Panday, 1981, A, 1982, and A, 1984. All 4 films were shown at the Metro Manila Film Festival in their respective years. Anna animated a TV series, dubbed as the first full-length Filipino animation series, was shown in the RPN 9A during the mid-1980s. It was patterned after the storyline of the first movie. Plot: Flavio, Fernando Poe Jr., is a panday, or blacksmith, whose village and land are under the reign of the tyrant Lizardo, Max Alvarado. Flavio is forced to brand innocent children every night with Lizardo's mark by the head of Lizardo's men in the village, Bilo Paquito Diaz. One day, Flavio's predecessor as Panday, Tata Temyong, Lito Anzars, finds the legendary Black Book that supposedly tells how Lizardo can be defeated. Later that night, a meteorite lands in a nearby field. Based on a prophecy in the Black Book, Flavio and Tata Temyong then use the meteorite and an old belt to create a magic dagger, the only weapon that can defeat Lizardo. After finishing the weapon, Flavio hunts down Lizardo's men in the village. Flavio then brands them before setting off with Tata Temyong, his young apprentice Lando, Bantot Jr., and Monica, Liz Aline Dogan, a woman he had saved from Lizardo's men, to defeat the evil tyrant. Flavio and his companions soon come across a seaside hut where they believe Lizardo dwells. Instead, it is home to one of Lizardo's henchmen, a wizard. Flavio defeats him, but soon afterward, they are attacked by Asikoya, mermen, that are driven away when Flavio's dagger hums. When Pilo and his men arrive seeking revenge against Flavio, they attack and eat Pilo and his men instead. Later, Flavio and his companions are attacked by a zombie in a forest. Tata Temyong and Monica end up separated and captured by Lizardo's men. Elsewhere, Lando finds refuge in a hut haunted by Anna Wang, and after a chase, Flavio finds and defeats it with his dagger. Tata Temyong and Monica are then brought to Lizardo's fortress. After hearing of Flavio's quest from Tata Temyong, Lizardo challenges Flavio to a duel in the desert. Lizardo brings Tata Temyong, Monica, and all his slaves to witness the battle. Lizardo first orders his men to attack Flavio, who, though vastly outnumbered, defeats them after his dagger transforms into a sword. Lizardo then faces Flavio himself, only to rapidly age every time Flavio hits him. Flavio ends the duel by stabbing Lizardo in the chest, who dies and fades away. With Lizardo defeated, Flavio leads his companions and the former slaves to freedom. The story begins in a distant, almost mythical time in a quiet rural village where life appears simple on the surface, yet carries an unspoken tension beneath it. The people live modest lives surrounded by nature, tradition, and a routine. But there is a lingering sense of fear that never fully disappears. Also, if something dark exists beyond their world, something waiting for the right moment to return. This is not just a peaceful land, it is a land that has a known conflict. A place where the balance between good and evil has never truly been stable. At the center of this world lives Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., a humble blacksmith whose life revolves around hard work, discipline, and simplicity. He spends his days forging tools and weapons for others, shaping metal with precision and strength, yet he himself avoids the violence. There is a quiet strength in him, not the kind that seeks battle, but the kind that endures. He is respected in the village not as a warrior but as a man of integrity, someone who, chooses peace even in a world that does not always allow it. But fate does not always respect peace. One night the sky itself seems to break open, a blazing light tears through the darkness, cutting across the heavens before crashing violently into the earth. The villagers are shaken by the impact, unsure of what they have just witnessed, but Flavio is drawn to it. There is something unnatural about the event, something that does not belong to their world. When he finally reaches the site, he discovers a strange piece of metal unlike anything he has ever seen. It is not ordinary iron, not something shaped by human hands. It carries a presence, an energy that feels alive, as if it holds power beyond understanding. Driven by curiosity and instinct, Flavio takes the metal and brings it back to his forge. As a blacksmith, his purpose is to shape raw material into something useful, something meaningful. But this time, the process feels different. The metal resists in subtle ways, reacting to heat and pressure unlike anything he has worked with before. And yet, as he continues, something begins to take form, a sword. But this is no ordinary weapon. The blade that emerges carries a glow, a presence that feels almost conscious. It is perfectly balanced, impossibly strong, and radiates a kind of power that cannot be explained by craftsmanship alone. This sword is not just forged, it is awakened. It becomes clear that this weapon was never meant to be ordinary. It is something greater, something destined to play a role far beyond the village. And as that power is born, it does not go unnoticed. Far beyond the peaceful ends in the domain of darkness, and ancient evil senses, the disturbance, Lazzarto, a powerful and a ruthless force of darkness, becomes aware of the sword's existence. To him, this is not just a weapon, it is a threat, a direct challenge to the power he seeks to control. He understands immediately that as long as this sword exists, his dominance over the land will never be complete. And so the balance begins to shift. Flavio, who once lived a quiet life, unknowingly becomes the center of a growing conflict. A man who never sought power, now holds something that could change the fate of an entire world. He does not yet understand the weight of what he has created, nor the danger it will bring to his life and those, music, around him. Because from this moment forward, he is no longer just a blacksmith, he is becoming something else. A symbol of resistance against a darkness that is beginning to arise once again. The arrival of the sword does not immediately bring chaos, but it quietly begins to change the rhythm of the world around Flavio. Life in the village continues on the surface, yet something feels different, slightly altered, as if an unseen force has begun to shift the balance. The blade he forged is no longer just an object resting in his possession. It carries a presence that cannot be ignored. Even in the stillness, it seems alive, as though Ida is waiting for a purpose that has yet to fully reveal itself. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., tries to treat the sword like any other creation, but deep down he understands that it is not the same. There is a connection forming between him and the weapon, only that goes beyond craftsmanship. When he holds it, there is a sense of clarity, a strange awareness that sharpens his instincts and heightens his perception. It is not overwhelming, but it is undeniable. This sword was not made by chance. Ida feels as if it chose him just as much as he created it. Meanwhile, beyond the safety of the village, darkness begins to move. Lazzarto, the embodiment of evil, does not act recklessly. He observes, calculates, and waits. The knowledge of the sword's existence spreads through his domain like a signal, drawing his attention with an increasing intensity. He understands what others do not, that such a weapon could disrupt everything he has built. To him, power must remain unchallenged, and anything capable of opposing it must be eliminated before it can grow stronger. His influence begins to stretch outward, slowly reaching toward at the peaceful lands. It does not arrive yet in a single overwhelming wave, but in subtle disturbances, shadows where there should be light, whispers where there should be silence, fear where there should be calm. The villagers begin to feel it, though they cannot fully explain it. Something is coming, something they cannot see, but can sense in the way the air itself feels heavier. Flavio starts to notice these changes also well. The world around him no longer feels as stable as it once did. Similar unexplainable events begin to occur, each one insignificant on its own, put together forming a pattern that cannot be ignored. The peace he once relied on now begins to fracture, replaced by uncertainty. And at the center of that uncertainty is the sword. The realization begins to settle slowly. This is not a coincidence. The blade he forged is connected to something far greater than his own life. It is tied to forces beyond the village, beyond his understanding, and beyond anything he ever intended to be part of. The idea of remaining neutral, of staying out of conflict begins to feel less possibly with each passing moment. At the same time, the people around him remain unaware of the full truth. They continue their daily routines, holding on to it normally even as the world begins to shift beneath them. But fear grows quietly, spreading through conversations, through glances, through the way people begin to look toward the horizon with uncertainty. And then comes the first real sign that everything is about to change, a disturbance, something no longer subtle, a presence that can be felt clearly, directly, without doubt. It is the kind of moment that breaks illusion, that removes any chance of denying what is happening. The darkness is no longer distant, it is moving closer. Flavio stands at the center of it all, holding the sword that has awakened something far beyond his control. He can feel it now, the weight of responsibility, the shift from observer to participant. The life he once lived, simple and predictable, is already slipping away, replaced by something uncertain and dangerous, because the truth is becoming impossibly to ignore. This is no longer just his story, it is the beginning of a conflict that will reach far beyond the village, beyond anything he has ever known. And whether he is ready or not, he is already part of it. The shift in the world does not arrive as a sudden explosion of chaos, but as a steady creeping unease that begins to settle over the village like an invisible shadow. The air feels heavier, conversations grow quieter, and the sense of normality that once defined daily life starts to fade. It is not something that can be easily explained. Yet, everyone feels it in different ways. A tension that lingers just beneath the surface, waiting to reveal itself. The balance that once held the world steady has begun to tilt, and no one fully understands why. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., becomes increasingly aware that the sword he forged is at the center of this change. It is no longer just an object resting in his home. It feels like a source, a point from which something larger is spreading outward. The connection between him and the blade grows stronger, not in a way that overwhelms him, but in a way that sharpens his instincts and forces him to pay attention. He begins to notice things others cannot, subtle changes in the environment, slight disturbances in the stillness of the night, moments where silence feels unnatural rather than peaceful. At times, the Saurda itself seems to react almost as if it senses what is approaching before it can be seen. It does not move, it does not speak, but its presence carries an awareness that cannot be ignored. When Flavio holds it, there is a quiet intensity that flows through him, a sense that this weapon is more than a forged metal. It is something connected to a purpose that has yet to fully reveal itself. And with that realization comes a growing understanding that his life is no longer separate from whatever is coming. Far beyond the village, in the domain ruled by darkness, the awareness of the sword continues to spread. Lazaretto, the force that thrives in shadow and control, does not act music impulsively. He studies, he observes, and he prepares. The existence of the sword represents more than just opposition. It represents a disruption of power, a challenge to the order he has built. He understands that such a weapon cannot be ignored because if left unchecked, it could become the very thing that stands against him. This influence begins to extend outward more deliberately now, no longer subtly enough to be dismissed as coincidence. Strange occurrences begin to increase not just in frequency but in intensity. The natural world itself seems to react. Animals grow restless. The wind carries an unfamiliar weight and the night feels longer, darker, more uncertain. The village, once a place of stability, begins to feel exposed as if it is no longer protected from what lies beyond it. Flavio finds himself caught between two realities, the life he has always known and the one that is beginning to form around him. He tries to hold on to the idea that he can remain separate from the conflict, that he can continue living as he always has. But with each passing moment, that possibility becomes harder to believe. The signs are too clear. The change is too real. The people around him begin to notice his growing distance, the way his focus shifts, the way he seems to carry a weight that was not there before. They do not know the truth, but they can sense that something is different. The calm blacksmith they once knew is beginning to change, not into something unrecognizable, but into someone who is aware of a reality others cannot yet see. And then the silence breaks in a way that cannot be ignored. A presence moves closer, no longer distant, no longer hidden. It is the kind of shift that transforms uncertainty into a certainty, that replaces doubt with a realization. The darkness that was once far away is now approaching, and it is no longer content to remain. Music unseen. Flavio stands at the center of this growing tension, holding the sword that has awakened something far greater than he ever intended. He can feel it now clearly and undeniably. The connection, the responsibility, the inevitability of what is coming. The life he once lived is no longer within reach because the moment has arrived where observation ends and involvement begins. The tension that once lingered quietly over the village now begins to take shape in ways that can no longer be ignored. What was once a feeling and unease carried in silence starts to manifest into something real, something visible. The world around, music. Flavio is no longer holding itself together with the same calm certainty it once did. The nights grow heavier, the shadows stretch longer, and the sense of being watched begins to settle into every corner of the land. It is no longer a question of whether something is coming, it is a matter of when it will arrive. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr. now carries a growing awareness that his connection to Thea's sword is not accidental. The blade is no longer just a weapon he created. It has become an extension of something far greater, something tied directly to Thea imbalance spreading through the world. When he holds it, the sensation is stronger now, more defined, as if the sword itself is guiding him toward a truth he has yet to fully understand. Ida does not speak, yet it communicates in a way that goes beyond words, sharpening his instincts and pulling his attention toward the unseen forces around him. The village, once a place of comfort and a routine, begins to change in ways that unsettle everyone who lives there. Small disturbances become more frequent, moments where the natural order feels disrupted, where silence feels unnatural rather than peaceful. People begin to notice things they cannot explain, and a fear starts to grow, not as panic, but as a quiet, spreading awareness that something is, music, wrong. Conversations become more cautious, a glance is more uncertain, and the sense of safety that once defined their lives begins to erode. Beyond the village, the darkness that has been gathering, now it begins to move with purpose. Lizard, the force behind this growing threat, no longer remains distant. His influence stretches outward, reaching closer to the land where Flavio lives. He does not rush blindly into action. His movements are calculated, deliberate, designed to test and observe before fully committing. The existence of the sword has shifted his attention completely, and now everything he does is centered around understanding and ultimately eliminating the threat it represents. The first direct signs of confrontation begin to appear, not as full-scale attacks, but as probing movements, as if the darkness is testing the boundaries of the village's safety. These moments are brief, but undeniable enough to confirm what Flavio has already begun to suspect. The threat is no longer abstract, it is real, it is present, and it is moving closer with intent. Flavio finds himself standing at the edge of a decision he never wanted to make. The life he wants, music, lived as a simple blacksmith is slipping further away with each passing moment. The idea of remaining neutral, of staying out of the conflict begins to feel impossible. The sword in his possession is not something that can be hidden or ignored. It is a symbol, a force that draws attention from both sides of the growing struggle. The people around him begin to look to him differently now, even without knowing the full truth. They sense that he is connected to what is happening. There is a quiet expectation forming, an unspoken belief that he may be the only who stands between them and whatever is coming. It is not something he asked for, and it is not something he feels fully prepared to accept, but it is a reality that continues to take shape around him. The world is changing, and with it so is Flavio. The calm, predictable life he once knew is no longer within reach. In its place is something uncertain, something dangerous, something that demands action rather than avoidance. The sword he forged has become more than just a creation. It has become a responsibility, a connection to a larger conflict that is no longer distant, and as the darkness draws closer, one to the music becomes impossible to ignore. This is no longer a story that can unfold without him, because whether he chooses it or not, he is already becoming the hero this world is about to need. The growing darkness no longer hides behind subtle signs or distant enemies. It begins to press directly against the edges of the village, testing its strength, its unity, and its ability to endure what is coming. The atmosphere shifts from quiet tension to an active uncertainty, where every sound feels, music, amplified, and every shadow seems to carry meaning. The nights no longer bring rest, instead, they stretch into something heavier, filled with the sense that the world itself is watching and waiting. The fragile balance that once kept everything in place, is now clearly breaking apart. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., can no longer deny the connection between himself, the sword, and the events unfolding around him. The weapon he forged has become something far beyond his understanding. A force that seems to resonate with the very changes happening in the world. When he holds it now, the sensation is stronger, more direct, as if it is guiding him towards something inevitable. It does not give answers, but it removes doubt. It makes one thing clear: this is not a coincidence. The village begins to feel smaller, more vulnerable, as if the safety it once offered is slowly being stripped away. People grow restless, their routines disrupted, not by visibly destruction, but by the growing awareness that something is approaching. The air carries a different weight, only that presses down on every moment, making even the simplest actions feel uncertain. Conversations become shorter, quieter, filled with unspoken fear. No one fully understands what is happening, but everyone knows that it is not normal. Beyond the village, the darkness advances with quiet precision. Lazaretto, the force driving this rising threat, begins to move more deliberately. His actions are no longer distant or indirect. They're calculated steps toward confrontation. He seeks not just to observe but to understand the nature of the sword and the man who wields it. To him, Flavio is no longer insignificant. He has become a variable, a potential obstacle that must be measured, tested, and ultimately removed. The first real confrontation begins to take form not as a full battle, but as an undeniable clash between opposing forces. The darkness reaches outward, probing the boundaries of the village, creating moments where fear turns into reality. These encounters are brief but powerful enough to confirm that the threat is no longer theoretical. It is here. It is active and it is growing stronger with each passing moment. Flavio finds himself standing at the center of this shift, no longer able to remain on the outside. The sword in his possession reacts more intensely now, as if responding to the presence of opposing force. It becomes clear that this weapon is not passive. It is part of the conflict itself, a counterbalance to the darkness that is beginning to emerge. The people around him begin to look at him differently. Where once they saw only a blacksmith, they now see someone connected to something larger. There is no official declaration, no spoken agreement, yet music, unspoken understanding begins to form. Flavio may be the only one capable of standing against what is coming. Ida is not a role he chose, music, and Ida is not one he feels ready to accept, but it is a reality that continues to close in around him. The world has moved beyond the point of quiet change. It has entered a phase where action becomes unavoidable, where choices must be made even without full understanding. The darkness is no longer waiting, it is advancing. The moment that once felt distant now fully arrives, and with it, the fragile peace of the village begins to shatter under the weight of a force that can no longer be contained at the edges. What was once a creeping darkness now takes a form in direct confrontation, turning the uncertainty into undeniable reality. The air itself feels charged, as if the world is bracing for impact. And the silence that once filled the nights, is replaced by a growing tension that refuses to settle. This is no longer a warning. It is the beginning of something far more dangerous. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now stands at the threshold between the life he once knew and the one that has been forced upon him. The sword in his possession is no longer just a symbol of something greater. It has become an active force reacting to the presence of darkness with a clarity that cannot be ignored. When he holds it, The connection is stronger than ever before. Almost as if the blade itself is preparing for what is about to come. Ida does not hesitate, and in that Ida contrasts sharply with Flavio's own inner conflict. The first true clash begins not with a full-scale battle but with a sudden disruption that breaks the illusion of safety completely. The darkness reaches into the village, no longer testing but asserting its presence. The people who once music only felt unease are now faced with something real, something that cannot be explained away or ignored. Fear spreads quickly, not as panic but also realization. The threat is here and Ida is not leaving. Flavio reacts not out of a desire for conflict but out of a necessity. The moment demands action, music, and the choice to remain passive is no longer an option. As he steps forward with the sword, something shifts within him. The hesitation that Ansia held him back begins to fade, replaced by a focus shaped by circumstance. He is not acting as a warrior by nature, but as someone who understands that inaction will only allow the darkness to grow stronger. The sword responds in kind, its presence becoming more intense, more alive, as if it has been waiting for this exact moment. There is a sense of alignment now between the weapon, the wielder, and the situation unfolding around them. It is not perfect, not effortless, but it is real. The connection between Flavio and the blade becomes something that can no longer be separated from the conflict itself. Beyond the immediate confrontation, the larger reality begins to reveal itself. This is not an isolated event, not a single attack that can be repelled and forgotten. It is part of something bigger, a movement of darkness that is expanding, testing and preparing for something far greater. The village is not the only place at risk. It is simply the first to feel the full weight of what is coming. The people begin to see Flavio differently now, not just as someone connected to the events, but also someone who stands at the center of them. There is no longer uncertainty about his role, whether he accepts Ida fully or not. He has already stepped into it. The blacksmith who once shaped weapons for others is now the one who must, music, use them. And with that realization comes a new kind of pressure, not just the need to survive, but the need to stand against something that cannot be easily understood or defeated. The path ahead is no longer unclear, but it is far from easy. It is filled with danger, uncertainty, and music, the constant presence of a force that continues to grow stronger. The world has changed, and with it, so has Flavio. The line between peace and conflict has been crossed, and there is no returning to what once was. Because this is no longer the beginning of a threat. This is the beginning of a war. The first confrontation does not end the fear, it amplifies it. What was once an unseen presence has now revealed itself. And with that revelation comes a deeper, a more unsettling truth. This is only the beginning. The village which once stood as a symbol of quiet life and now feels exposed, fragile, and uncertain. The illusion of safety has been completely broken, replaced by the understanding that something far more powerful is moving through their world with intent. The air feels heavier than before, as if the land itself is reacting to the shift, carrying the weight of a conflict that has only just begun to surface. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., stands at music, the center of this transformation, no longer able to distance himself from what is happening. The sword he forged has fully revealed its nature, not just as a weapon, but also something connected to the balance between opposing forces. It reacts more intensely now, almost as if Ida recognizes the presence of darkness nearby and prepares itself accordingly. When Flavio holds it, there is no longer confusion about its purpose. The connection between him and the blade has become clear, direct, and impossible to ignore. Yet, despite this clarity, the weight of responsibility begins to settle heavily on him. This is not what he wanted, not the life he chose. He was never meant to stand at the front of a conflict this large. And yet, Everything around him continues to push him into a troll. The people look to him differently now, not just with hope, but with expectation. They see in him something they cannot fully understand, but instinctively trust. To them, he is no longer just a blacksmith, he is a defender, perhaps the only one capably, music, of standing against what is coming. Beyond the village, the darkness continues to gather strength. Lazardo's presence grows more defined, more deliberate. He is no longer simply observing, he is advancing. The initial confrontation was not an end, but a test, a way to measure the resistance he faces. And now, having seen enough, he begins to move with greater intention. His goal is clear. The sword must be destroyed, and the man who wields it must be eliminated before he can fully realize his potential. This realization begins to spread through the world like a silent signal. The conflict is no longer contained to a single location, it is expanding, reaching outward, touching places and people who have yet to understand their connection to it. The village is only one piece of a much larger struggle, one that is growing and more complex with each passing moment. Flavio begins to feel the pressure of this expanding reality. It is no longer just about protecting his home. It is about confronting something that exists beyond it. The idea of staying within the safety of the village becomes less realistic with every passing moment. The darkness will not stop at its borders, and neither can he. The sword, once a mystery, now feels like a guide, not in a way that gives clear direction, but in a way that removes hesitation. It reinforces the truth that action is necessary, that standing still will only allow the threat to grow stronger. The connection between Flavio and the weapon deepens, forming a bond that is no longer just physical, but symbolic of the role he is being forced to accept. And as the tension continues to rise, one thing becomes undeniable. This conflict is not going to fade away. It is going to grow, to spread, and to demand more than anyone is prepared to give. Flavio stands at the center of it all, no longer just reacting, but beginning to understand, music, what must be done, because the battle has already begun and the next phase will not wait. The aftermath of the first confrontation does not bring relief. It brings clarity. The village once grounded in routine and familiarity now exists in a state of constant tension where every moment feels uncertain and every shadow carries meaning. The people can no longer pretend that what they experienced was isolated or temporary. Something has changed permanently and that change has placed them directly in the path of a growing darkness. The fear that once lingered quietly has now taken a root, shaping how they move, how they speak, and how they see the world around them. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., stands at the center of this shift, fully aware that his role is no longer optional. The sword he forged is no longer just a mysterious creation. It has become the defining element of the conflict itself. Its presence feels stronger now, more responsive, as if it is attuned to the changes happening around it. When he holds it, there is a sense of purpose that was not there before. Not something fully understood, but something that removes hesitation. The connection between him and the blade has deepened to a point where separating the two feels impossible. Yet with that connection comes weight. Their responsibility is no longer abstract. It is immediate and real. The people of the village now look to him with a kind of hope that carries expectation. They might not fully understand what is happening, but they understand one thing clearly. Flavio is no longer just one of them. He has become something more, something tied directly to the force that is threatening their existence. And with that realization, their dependence on him begins to grow. Beyond the village, the darkness continues to expand with increasing confidence. Lizardo is no longer testing boundaries. He is preparing for domination. The earlier confrontation has given him what he needed. Confirmation that the sword exists and that it is capable of opposing him. Now his focus sharpens, He begins to move with purpose, directing his power toward eliminating the threat before it. Music can grow stronger. His actions become more calculated, more aggressive, and far more dangerous. The world beyond the village begins to feel the effects of this shift. The conflict is no longer contained. It is spreading outward, touching distant places and unseen paths. What started as a localized disturbance is becoming a something far more significant, a growing imbalance that threatens to consume everything if left unchecked. The scale of what is happening becomes clearer with each passing moment. Flavia begins to understand that staying within the village is no longer enough. The idea of defending a single place begins to feel limited, almost insignificant compared to the size of the threat he is facing. The darkness will not stop at borders, and neither can he. The realization begins to form slowly but firmly. If he wants to protect what matters, he may have to leave it behind, at least for a time. This internal conflict weighs heavily on him. The life he once knew still exists in fragments around him, but it is no longer something he can fully return to. The forge, the routine, the simplicity, all of it feels distant now, replaced by a reality that demands action, music, and a sacrifice. The sword, once just a creation of his craft, has become the path forward, whether he fully accepts it or not. The people begin to sense this shift in him. The way his focus changes, the way his presence carries a different kind of weight. He is no longer just reacting to events. He is beginning to move with intention. There is a quiet determination forming, not driven by desire for power, but by the understanding that inaction will only allow the darkness to spread further. And as the tension continues to build, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This is no longer about survival within the village. It is about confronting something that exists far beyond it. Flavio stands at the edge of that realization, knowing that whatever comes next will require more than he has ever given before. Because the path ahead is no longer uncertain, it is inevitable. Music, the sense of unease that hovered quietly over the village, now it becomes a constant presence. Music is something no one can fully ignore anymore. Life continues on the surface, but beneath it there is a growing awareness that the world is no longer stable. Every sound feels slightly sharper, every silence slightly heavier, as if reality itself is holding its breath before something irreversibly happens. The villagers begin to live with a quiet tension that follows the aim everywhere, even in moments that should feel normal. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., finds himself increasingly separated from the life he once knew. The sword he forged has become more than a tool or symbol. It now feels like a responsibility that constantly pulls at him. Its presence is no longer passive. It seems to react to his emotions, his decisions, and even the unseen forces around them. When he holds it, there is a strange certainty that replaces doubt, as if the blade is pushing him toward a path he cannot avoid, even if he does not fully understand where it leads. The village, meanwhile, continues to shift under the pressure of what is coming. People speak less openly now, their conversations are filled with pauses and unfinished thoughts. Fear is no longer loud or chaotic. It is quiet, persistent, and deeply rooted. It shows itself in how people look over their shoulders, in how they gather in groups for comfort, and in how they avoid speaking about what they all know is approaching but cannot yet define. The darkness beyond the village does not retreat. Instead, it strengthens in silence. Lazardo's presence becomes more deliberate, more focused, as if he is preparing for something far more direct than before. The earlier encounter was not enough to stop him. It only confirmed the existence of resistance. Now his intent sharpens. He no longer simply observes the village. He studies it, waiting for the right moment to tighten his grip on everything surrounding it. This growing pressure creates a shift in Flavio's understanding of his situation. It becomes increasingly clear that the conflict is not contained to a single moment or place. It is expanding, spreading outward like a force that cannot be stopped once it begins. The sword, once seen as a mysterious creation, now feels like the center of this expanding struggle, something that connects him directly to the balance between opposing forces. Yet, even with this realization, Flavio does not fully accept the idea of becoming what others expect him to be. There is still a hesitation within him, a reluctance to step completely into a role defined by a conflict. He understands the necessity, but understanding is not the same as acceptance. The weight of what lies ahead begins to press more heavily on him, creating an internal struggle between who he was and who he is becoming. The people around him continue to shift their perception. Without fully realizing it, they begin to depend on him more. Not because he asked for it, but because there is no one else they believe can stand in the face of what is approaching. This quiet expectation builds slowly, forming an unspoken responsibility that surrounds him even when no words are spoken. And through all of this, only a truth becomes increasingly difficult to avoid. The situation is no longer something that can be contained or delayed. It is moving toward a point of confrontation that cannot be avoided. Flavio stands at the center of that reality, caught between hesitation and a necessity, knowing that whatever happens next will define not just his fate, but the fate of everything around him. Because the darkness is no longer waiting in the distance, it is preparing to arrive. The calm that once remained in fragments across the village finally begins to disappear entirely, replaced by a growing sense that something irreversible is approaching. The atmosphere no longer shifts between peace and tension. It exists almost entirely in tension now, as if the world has already crossed a line that cannot be undone. Every passing moment feels heavier than the last. Not because of visible destruction, but because of the certainty that something far greater is slowly closing in. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now carries the full weight of a reality he can no longer step away from. The sword he forged is no longer a mysterious artifact or a distant responsibility. It has become a constant presence in his life, shaping every decision he makes. When he is near it, there is a feeling of alignment as if the blade is no longer separate from him, but part of the path he is being forced to walk. It does not offer clarity in words, but it removes a hesitation through instinct. The village itself begins to feel increasingly vulnerable. The sense of protection that once came from familiarity and isolation is fading, replaced by the understanding that the distance no longer offers safety. People begin to realize that whatever is coming is not bound by physical boundaries. It does not need to arrive suddenly. It is already spreading slowly, tightening its influence around everything they know. Fear becomes quieter but deeper, settling into everyday life in a way that cannot easily be ignored or removed. The darkness beyond the village grows more structured, more intentional. Laza Erdasa influence is no longer just an expanding music presence. It becomes a calculated movement. He is no longer simply observing or testing. He is preparing the conditions for a confrontation. His awareness of the sword has changed his strategy. What once might have been a distant concern has now become a direct objective. The existence of resistance is no longer acceptable to him, and everything he does now reflects that certainty. This shift forces Flavio into a deeper state of awareness. He begins to understand that the conflict is not something that will remain distant or contained. It is expanding in a way that will eventually reach him no matter what he chooses. The idea of remaining uninvolved starts to dissolve completely. Even in moments of stillness, There is a sense that time is moving toward a breaking point where neutrality will no longer be possible. The sword continues to act as a silent guide through this growing tension. Its presence feels more defined than before, not as an external force, but also something that resonates with Flavio's own instincts. It does not command him, but it aligns with the direction events are taking. Every time he holds it, there is a stronger awareness that whatever lies ahead is already in motion, regardless of hesitation or doubt. The villagers, though still unaware of the full scope of what is coming, begin to instinctively sense the shift in reality. Their dependence on Flavio grows without formal acknowledgement. There is no declaration of leadership, yet an unspoken understanding forms among them. If something is coming, he is the only standing closest to it. This expectation builds quietly, adding another layer of that pressure that he does not openly acknowledge but cannot ignore. And within this growing pressure, Flavio reaches a deeper realization. This is no longer about reacting to danger. The growing pressure surrounding the village no longer feels like something approaching from a distance. It feels so present, as if the world itself has already begun shifting, music, into a different state. The boundary between a normal life and something far more dangerous continues to blur until even ordinary moments carry an unspoken weight. Nothing appears openly chaotic yet, but everything feels unstable, like a calm surface hiding deep movement underneath. The sense of waiting has transformed into a sense of inevitability. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now finds himself living in a constant state of awareness. The sword he forged is no music longer something he thinks about occasionally. It is something that defines his daily reality. Its presence feels increasingly responsive, almost synchronized with the changes happening around him. When he is near it, there is a heightened sense of clarity, as if the weapon is amplifying his understanding of the situation without ever directly explaining it. It does not guide him with instructions but with instinct and pressure that cannot be ignored. The village begins to lose its emotional stability in subtle ways. People continue their routines, but their attention is no longer fully in the present. There is a distraction in the way they move, a hesitation in the way they speak, and a constant awareness that something unseen is influencing their world. Conversations become shorter, decisions more cautious, and a silence more frequent. The fear is no longer dramatic. It is quiet, persistent, and deeply embedded in daily life. Far beyond the visible borders of the village, the darkness continues to organize itself with increasing precision. Lizard's presence is no longer just a spreading influence. It has become structured intent. His focus on the sword and its wielder has evolved into something strategic. He is no longer simply reacting to resistance. He is preparing to eliminate it completely. Every movement from his side feels deliberate, as if each step is part of a larger plan slowly coming into alignment. This realization deepens Flavio's internal conflict. He begins to understand that what is happening, music, is not temporary nor contained to a single confrontation. It is expanding into something larger, something that will eventually reach a point of direct collision. The idea of distance or avoidance begins to lose meaning because everything now feels connected to the same unfolding direction. The sword continues to reinforce this understanding without words. Its presence does not offer comfort, but it strengthens awareness. It becomes a constant reminder that the situation is not static. It is progressing regardless of hesitation or denial. Each moment near it feels like he is standing closer to a decision that has already been made by circumstances beyond control. The villagers, though still not fully aware of the truth, begin to feel the emotional weight of the shift more deeply. Their reliance on Flavio grows not through spoken agreement but through silent recognition. There is an unspoken belief forming among them that if anything can stand against what is coming, it will be through him. This expectation settles quietly, adding pressure that increases with every passing day. And within Thea's growing inevitability, Flavio reaches a deeper realization. The conflict is no longer something approaching. It is something that has already begun forming its shape. The calm before the storm is no longer calm, and everything now moves towards a point where waiting will no longer be possible. The atmosphere surrounding the village finally reaches a stage where silence itself feels unnatural. What once passed as peace has now fully transformed into anticipation. Music, as if the world is holding its breath before something inevitably occurs. Even the smallest details of daily life feel altered. Movements are slower, conversations are quieter, and every passing moment carries an unspoken awareness that something unseen is drawing closer. The village is no longer simply living, it is waiting. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now exists in a state where separation between himself and the unfolding events is no longer possible. The sword he forged has become deeply tied to his perception of reality, almost like an extension of his own instincts. When he holds it, there is a stronger sense of awareness, an unspoken clarity that does not come as instruction, but as recognition of danger and purpose. It does not tell him what to do, but it removes the illusion that he can do nothing. Music. The village continues to feel the growing pressure of uncertainty. Even though no large-scale attack has fully unfolded yet, the emotional attention has already changed everything. People are no longer fully engaged with their normal lives. There is a distraction in their expressions, a hesitation in their actions, and a quiet fear that has become part of everyday existence. It is not panic, but to something deeper. An understanding that stability is no longer guaranteed. Beyond the boundaries of the village, the presence of darkness becomes more defined and purposeful. Laza Urdasa influence is no longer passive or distant. It has begun to take shape as intention, as planning, as preparation for a direct confrontation. He is no longer observing from afar. He is moving toward resolution. The existence of resistance embodied in the sword and the wielder has become the focal point of his attention. This shift creates a growing internal pressure on Flavio. The realization becomes unavoidable that the conflict is not something external that can be watched from a distance. It is something that is converging toward him. The idea of remaining uninvolved loses its meaning completely because the situation itself is expanding in a way that eventually includes him regardless of choice. The sword continues to play a silent but powerful role in Thea's transformation. It does not provide answers, but it strengthens awareness. Its presence feels increasingly synchronized with the changes happening in the world, as if it exists in parallel with the conflict rather than separate from it. Each time Flavio is near it, the sense of inevitability becomes clearer, reinforcing the understanding that the situation is already moving forward whether he is ready or not. The villagers begin to rely on him more heavily even without direct acknowledgement. There is a quiet expectation forming among them, not spoken, but felt, that Flavio represents their only real connection to whatever a force is approaching. This expectation adds weight to his decisions, shaping his role in ways he did not consciously choose. And within this growing pressure, Flavio reaches a point of understanding that cannot be reversed. The conflict is no longer approaching from a distance. It is already taking a form around him. What once felt like a warning has now become reality, and the next moment will no longer be about preparation, but about action. The attention that has been building across the village no longer feels like something distant or theoretical. It has now settled into the very atmosphere of daily life. Everything appears normal on the surface. Yet underneath that normality, there is a constant pressure, as if the world is holding itself together with difficulty. The air feels heavier, conversations are more cautious, and even silence carries a meaning. It is no longer about wondering if something will happen, but sensing that something is already in motion, just beyond immediate perception. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now finds himself fully aligned with the growing reality around him, even if he does not fully embrace it emotionally. The sword he forged has become inseparable from his awareness of the situation. Its presence feels steady yet intense, like a constant reminder that the balance between light and darkness is no longer abstract. It is active and shifting. When he holds it, There is a clarity that cuts through hesitation, not by giving answers, but by removing a doubt that inaction is an option. The village continues to function outwardly, but internally it is changing. People move with quiet hesitation as if expecting something at any moment. There is no visible enemy in front of them, yet the feeling of being watched or surrounded has become difficult to ignore. Fear is no longer loud or chaotic. It has, music, become quiet and persistent. Embedded in routine life. It shows itself in subtle ways. In shortened conversations, in restless expressions, in the way people instinctively gather closer together. Beyond the boundaries of the village, the influence of darkness becomes more focused. Lizardo's presence is no longer just expanding, it is organizing itself. His awareness of the sword and wielder has turned into intent, and that intent is beginning to shape action. He is no longer simply testing resistance, he is preparing to confront and remove it. The calm distance that has separated both sides is narrowing into something more direct and unavoidable. This growing reality weighs heavily on Flavio. He begins to understand that the situation is not waiting for permission to unfold. It is already unfolding. The idea of staying neutral or uninvolved slowly loses meaning because everything around him is converging toward the same point. Even when he tries to focus on ordinary life, there is always a sense that something larger is pulling events forward. The sword continues to reinforce this awareness in a quiet, constant way. It does not change, but its presence feels increasingly significant, as if it exists in rhythm with the changes occurring in the world. It becomes a silent anchor in a shifting reality, reminding Flavio that the separation between him and the conflict is disappearing. Other villagers, who are still unaware of the full truth, begin to sense that Flavio is connected to what is coming. They do not fully understand why, but there is a growing dependency forming around him. In their silence, in their looks, in their unspoken expectations, he becomes the figure they look toward without directly saying it. This weight settles around him, gradually adding pressure that he does not openly acknowledge but cannot escape. And within this rising tension, only understanding becomes unavoidable. The conflict is no longer approaching from at the distance. It is already shaping itself around them, and the moment of choice is no longer ahead. It is beginning now. The sense of inevitability that has been building around the village finally begins to take on a more defined shape, as if the unseen pressure that has been surrounding everything is now preparing to reveal itself in a more direct way. The world no longer feels like it is slowly changing. It feels like it is converging toward a single moment where everything will become clear at once. The quiet tension that once existed in the background now feels fully present, pressing into every part of daily life and leaving no space untouched. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now moves with a deeper sense of awareness than before. The sword he forged is no longer just an object of importance. It feels like a constant presence guiding his instincts in subtle but undeniable ways. When he holds it, there is a heightened clarity that allows him to sense imbalance in the environment, as if the blade itself is attuned to the shift between order and chaos. It does not give him direction in words, but it strengthens his understanding that whatever is coming is already too close to ignore. The village continues to exist outwardly in its normal form, but internally it is no longer the same place. The people carry a quiet tension in their movements, a hesitation that has become part of their routine without them fully realizing it. Conversations are shorter, pauses are longer, and attention is constantly drawn toward things that cannot be explained. It is as if the village is collectively sensing a presence that has not yet fully arrived, but is already influencing everything within reach. Beyond the visible world, the force of darkness continues to organize itself with increasing purpose. Lizardo's influence is no longer distant or abstract. It has become structured intent, moving closer to direct confrontation. The earlier phases of uncertainty and testing have given way to something more deliberate. He now moves with the understanding that resistance exists and that it must be addressed before it grows beyond control. The presence of the sword has become the central focus of his awareness, shaping every decision he makes. Flavio begins to feel these shift more clearly. It is no longer just a sense of danger, It is a growing realization that the situation is actively unfolding around him regardless of his participation. The idea of Faye remaining outside the conflict loses meaning because the conflict itself is no longer contained to a single point. It is expanding into every direction that touches his life. Even silence now feels temporary, as if it is only a pause before something unavoidably begins. The sword continues to play a quiet but powerful role in Thea's unfolding reality. It does not change in appearance or form, but its presence feels increasingly connected to the changes happening around it. It becomes a silent indicator that the balance between opposing forces is shifting and that Flavio is now directly tied to that shift whether he chooses it or not. Each moment near it reinforces the understanding that separation between him and the conflict is no longer possible. The villagers, still unaware of the full scope of what is approaching, begin to unconsciously place more expectation on Flavio. It is not spoken directly, but it is felt in their behavior, in their silence, and in the way they look toward him during uncertain moments. He becomes without a formal recognition the point around which their hope and fear begin to orbit. And within this growing convergence, the truth becomes unavoidable. The situation is no longer building towards something distant. Ida is already arriving in stages that cannot be reversed, and Flavio is no longer preparing for what comes next. He is already inside it. The rising tension that surrounds the village no longer feels like something external. It now feels embedded within everyday existence. The line between ordinary life and impending conflict has become thinner with each music passing momenta until it is almost unnoticeable. Everything continues as before on the surface, but underneath there is a steady pressure that suggests the world is no longer stable in the way it was. It is as if reality itself is quietly shifting, preparing for something that cannot yet be fully seen. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now exists in a constant state of heightened awareness. The sword he forged has become more than a weapon. It functions like a silent presence that influences his perception of the world around him. When he holds it, there is a sharp clarity that removes hesitation and replaces it with instinctive understanding. He does not receive instructions from it, but rather a sense that events are moving in a direction that cannot be stopped. The village continues to operate as if normal life still holds, but the emotional weight beneath it has changed everything. People go through their routines, yet there is a noticeable absence of ease. Every action carries subtle caution, every conversation has unspoken gaps, and every silence, music, feels more meaningful than words. It is not panic, it is anticipation mixed with uncertainty, a collective feeling that something unseen is steadily approaching. Beyond the visible world, the influence of darkness becomes more structured and deliberate. The presence is no longer just an expanding force. It is now a focused intention moving toward resolution. His awareness of the sword has transformed into a strategic determination. He is no longer observing the balance between forces. He is preparing to disrupt it completely. Each movement he makes carries the weight of purpose, as if every step is a part of a carefully forming plan. Flavio begins to recognize that what is happening cannot be separated into stages of before and after. The conflict is no longer approaching from a distance. It is already weaving itself into the present. Even moments of calm feel temporary, as if they exist only to make the coming change more noticeable. The idea of avoiding involvement slowly disappears, replaced by the understanding that involvement is already happening. The sword continues to reinforce this realization without ever speaking. Its presence feels aligned with the changes occurring in the world, as if it exists in parallel with the rising tension. It does not guide Flavio with direction, but Ida strengthens his awareness that the balance between opposing forces is actively shifting. Each moment near Ida feels like standing closer to a decision that has already been set in motion. The villagers, though still lacking full understanding, begin to instinctively sense Flavio's connection to what is coming. Their dependence on him grows quietly without formal recognition. It appears in their behavior, in the way they look toward him during uncertain moments, in the way they pause before speaking, in the way his presence seems to offer reassurance even without explanation. The world surrounding the village finally reaches a stage where uncertainty no longer feels abstract. It becomes music, tangible, almost physical, as if the very air has thickened with the weight of what I say about music, to unfold. The slow build-up of tension that once existed in fragments now feels unified, like all the scattered signs and silent fears have emerged into a single unavoidably direction. Even without visibly destruction, the sense of stability has already been lost, replaced by a quiet but constant expectation of confrontation. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now moves through this shifting reality with a level of awareness that goes beyond ordinary understanding. The sword he forged has become fully integrated into his perception of the world. It no longer feels like an external object, but like a companion presence that reacts in a subtle harmony with the environment. When he holds it, there is an undeniably clarity, a sharpening of instinct that allows him to sense imbalance and attention even before it becomes visible. The village continues its outward rhythm, but internally it is no longer the same. Life proceeds in appearance only, while underneath the collective awareness continues to grow. People speak less freely now, their words carrying hesitation, their movements shaped by caution. They cannot fully music explain. It is as if every Nia senses the same truth without needing Ida to be spoken. Something is coming and Ida is no longer far away. Beyond the visible world, Lizardo's influence has reached a more decisive stage. The darkness he represents is no longer expanding music blindly. It is now focused, directed, and purposeful. His awareness of the sword and its wielder has become a fixed point of intent, shaping all of his actions moving forward. What was once observation has transformed into preparation for a confrontation, and what was once distant has now, music, become immediate intent. Flavio begins to fully understand that there is no longer a clear boundary between approaching a danger and music, present danger. The distinction has dissolved. The conflict is no longer moving toward him from afar. It is already embedded in the present moment, unfolding in layers that are only now becoming visible. Even a silence feels temporary, as if it exists only to precede impact. The sword continues to reflect this reality in its own quiet way. It does not speak or change, but its presence feels increasingly synchronized with the growing imbalance in the world. Each moment near it reinforces Flavio's awareness that everything is moving toward a point of collision. It becomes less about choice and more about a recognition that the situation is no longer forming, but already formed. The villagers, though still lacking full understanding, now place an unspoken reliance on Flavio that grows stronger with every passing moment. It is not declared openly, but it is felt in their behavior, in the way they look toward him when uncertainty rises, in the way his presence becomes a silent anchor during moments of doubt. He is no longer just part of the village. He has become at the point around which their hope and fear quietly gather. And as this convergence deepens, one truth becomes impossible to deny. The moment of that transition has already passed. What they are experiencing is not the beginning of something new, but the arrival of something that has already begun. And everything now moves toward a point where confrontation is no longer possible to avoid. The growing instability around the village now feels fully integrated into everyday reality. No longer something that can be separated into normal life and incoming danger. Instead, everything exists in a blended state where even ordinary moments carry a hidden weight as if they are part of a larger process unfolding quietly in the background. The sense of waiting has disappeared, replaced by the feeling that events are already in motion and simply have not yet revealed their full shape. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now experiences the world with a sharpened awareness that is directly tied to the sword he forged. The blade no longer feels like a tool he created. It feels like a constant presence that reacts in subtle harmony with shifts in the environment. When he holds it, there is a heightened sense of clarity that cuts through uncertainty, allowing him to recognize tension and imbalance even before it becomes visible. It does not guide him with the words but with instinct and perception that feel unavoidable. The village continues its outward routines but internally everything has changed. People still perform their daily tasks, but there is a noticeable lack of ease in how they move and speak. Conversations are shorter, pauses are longer, and silence carries more meaning than speech. It is not panic, but a quiet awareness shared by everyone, and an understanding that something unseen is drawing closer, and that stability can no longer be taken for granted. Beyond the visible world, Lizardo's influencia, music, has reached a stage of focusita intent. The darkness is no longer expanding randomly. It is organizing itself with purpose. His awareness of the sword and Flavio has become central to his actions, shaping every decision he makes. What was once distant, music observation has now become preparation for direct confrontation. The imbalance he perceives is no longer something music to watch. It is something to correct by force. Flavio begins to fully realize that the situation is no longer developing in stages. It is already active. The idea of before and after begins to lose meaning because everything now feels like part of the same ongoing moment. Even when nothing appears to happen, there is a sense that change is occurring just beneath the surface, waiting for the right instant to reveal itself. The sword continues to act as a silent reflection of this reality. Ida remains unchanged in form, but its presence feels increasingly aligned with the shifts in the world around it. Each moment near it reinforces Flavio's understanding that he is no longer outside the conflict. He is already inside it. The separation between observer and participant has effectively disappeared. The villagers, still unaware of the full truth, continue to grow more dependent on Flavio without ever stating it directly. It appears in the way they look to him during moments of uncertainty, in the way his presence brings unspoken reassurance, and in the way silence gathers around him as if expecting direction. He has become the point where fear and hope meet, even though no one has formally acknowledged it. And within this deepening convergence, one realization becomes unavoidable. The boundary between calm and conflict no longer exists. There is no approaching moment anymore. Only a continuation, and everything now moves forward as part of something that has already begun to take shape completely. The final illusion of normally within the village finally begins to collapse completely, not through a single dramatic event but through a steady realization that nothing has been normal for some time. What once felt like routine life now appears fragile in hindsight, as if it was only ever a temporary surface covering something far deeper. The world does not suddenly change. It reveals that it has already changed long ago, and that the consequences are only now becoming visible. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now stands at a point where hesitation no longer has space to exist. The sword he forged has fully integrated into his perception of reality, becoming inseparable from the way he interprets everything around him. When he holds it, there is a strong, steady clarity, not emotional comfort, but focused awareness that strips away uncertainty. Music confirms what he already knows deeper down. The situation is no longer approaching. It is fully present. The village itself feels transformed under this realization. People continue to move, speak, and work, but every action now carries a sense of underlying attention. It is as if they are all participating in a shared understanding that has never been spoken aloud. The absence of direct explanation makes the feeling stronger, not weaker. Every senses that something is fundamentally wrong, but no one can define it clearly enough to confront it. Beyond the visible horizon, Lizardo's presence has now reached full intent. The darkness he represents is no longer a distant force or a growing influence. It is a structured will moving toward direct confrontation. His awareness of Flavio and the sword has become the center of his purpose, and everything he does now is shaped by the need to eliminate resistance before it can fully mature. The balance between opposing forces has stopped shifting and has begun locking into position. Flavio begins to understand that the separation he believed, music, existed between himself and the conflict was never real. There was no delay, no distant starting point, and no safe, music, distance. Everything that has happened was already part of the same unfolding reality. Even moments that felt calm were only part of the process leading to this stage. The realization is not sudden. It settles slowly, becoming undeniable with each passing, music, moment. The sword reflects this understanding in its own silent way. It does not change, but its presence feels increasingly aligned with the inevitability of what is coming. It becomes a constant reminder that the conflict is not something he is preparing for, it is something he is already inside. The boundary between preparation and participation has fully music, disappeared. The villagers, though still without full knowledge, now exist in a shared emotional state of dependence and uncertainty. Their reliance on Flavio is no longer subtle. It has become the natural response to instability. He is not formally chosen, not declared, but quietly recognized as the point around which everything else now revolves. Their hope, fear, and expectation converge around him without words. And at this final stage of realization, one truth becomes absolute. There is no longer a path leading toward conflict. There is only the moment of standing within it. Everything that was building has already arrived, and what remains is no longer anticipation but confrontation itself. The sense of uncertainty that music once lingered over the village has now completely transformed into a permanent state of awareness. There is no longer a distinction between calm moments and tense moments, because everything now exists under the same quiet pressure. Life continues outwardly in its familiar form, but internally it feels like the world has already crossed a threshold that cannot be reversed. The illusion of safety has fully dissolved, leaving behind only recognition that something larger is already in motion. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now exists in a state of full alignment with this shifting reality. The sword he forged is no longer something. The balance between opposing forces has stopped shifting and has begun locking into position. Flavio begins to understand that the separation he once believed, music, existed between himself and the conflict was never real. There was no delay, no distant starting point, and no safe, music, distance. Everything that has happened was already part of the same unfolding reality. Even moments that felt calm were only part of the process leading to this stage. The realization is not sudden. It settles slowly, becoming undeniable with each passing, music, moment. The sword reflects this understanding in its own silent way. It does not change, but its presence feels increasingly aligned with the inevitability of what is coming. It becomes a constant reminder that the conflict is not something he is preparing for, it is something he is already inside. The boundary between preparation and participation has fully, music, disappeared. The villagers, though still without full knowledge, now exist in a shared emotional state of dependence and uncertainty. Their reliance on Flavio is no longer subtle. It has become the natural response to instability. He is not formally chosen, not declared, but quietly recognized as the point around which everything else now revolves. Their hope, fear, and expectation converge around him without words. And at this final stage of realization, one truth becomes absolute. There is no longer a path leading toward conflict. There is only the moment of standing within it. Everything that was building has already arrived, and what remains is no longer anticipation but confrontation itself. The sense of uncertainty that music once lingered over the village has now completely transformed into a permanent state of awareness. There is no longer a distinction between calm moments and tense moments, because everything now exists under the same quiet pressure. Life continues outwardly in its familiar form, but internally it feels like the world has already crossed a threshold that cannot be reversed. The illusion of safety has fully dissolved, leaving behind only recognition that something larger is already in motion. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now exists in a state of full alignment with this shifting reality. The sword he forged is no longer something he interprets. It has become something that shapes his interpretation of everything around him. When he holds it, there is a steady clarity that removes hesitation and sharpens awareness. It does not provide answers, but it makes denial impossible. The sense that events are already unfolding becomes undeniable. The village continues to function, but the emotional structure has changed completely. People still carry out their daily routines, yet every action feels influenced by an unspoken understanding that stability is no longer guaranteed. Conversations are quieter, movements more cautious, and silence more frequent. It is not chaos that defines this stage, but awareness. The shared recognition that something unseen is already affecting everything. Beyond the visible world, Lizardo's influence has reached a point of focused determination. The darkness he represents is no longer expanding without direction. It is now fully organized around intent. His awareness of Flavio and the sword has become the center of his strategy. What was once a distant observation has turned into a preparation for direct confrontation, where resistance is no longer something to be monitored but something to be removed. Flavio now understands more clearly that the separation he once believed in never truly existed. There was no distant beginning to the conflict that he could avoid or delay. Everything that has happened was already a part of the same unfolding process. Even other moments that felt calm were simply a part of a larger structure leading it toward this point. The realization is not sudden, it builds slowly until it becomes impossible to ignore. The sword continues to mirror this understanding in a silent, consistent way. It does not change in form, but its presence feels increasingly connected to the shifting balance between opposing forces. It becomes a music, constant reminder that what is happening is not something he is preparing for, it is something he is already part of. The boundary between readiness and involvement no longer exists. The villagers, still unaware of the full truth, music, now exist in a shared emotional condition shaped by uncertainty and quiet dependence. Without formal acknowledgement, Flavio has become the central point of their collective attention. In moments of doubt, their instincts turn toward him, not because he has declared himself a leader, but because the situation has naturally positioned him as the only closest to the unfolding truth. And within this fully formed reality, only a conclusion becomes unavoidable. It has already begun fully and completely. And now everything moves forward not toward change but as the continuation of what is already happening. The final stage of realization settles over everything with a quiet certainty that cannot be undone. The village no longer feels like a place standing on the edge of change. It feels like a place already living inside it, where the consequences of unseen forces are gradually becoming visible in everyday life. There is no longer a clear sense of before and after. Only the understanding that whatever was coming has already integrated itself into the present moment. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now moves through this reality with a calmness shaped not by peace but by acceptance of inevitability. The sword he forged has become fully aligned with his perception of the world around him. When he holds it, the clarity it provides is immediate and unmistakable. It removes doubt not by explaining anything but by making it impossible to ignore what is already true. The situation is no longer developing, it is established. The village continues its daily rhythm, but that rhythm now feels fragile, almost like a memory of normal life rather than a reality itself. People still speak, still work, still move through familiar patterns. But everything is influenced by a shared awareness that something fundamental has changed. It is not spoken openly, but it exists in their silence, in their hesitation, and in the way they instinctively look toward uncertain spaces as if expecting something to emerge. Beyond the visibly world, Lizardo's presence has reached the final form of intent. The darkness he embodies is no longer expanding or testing. It is now fully directed toward a resolution. His focus on Flavio and the sword has become absolute, shaping his actions into a singular purpose. There is no longer observation or hesitation from his side, only the certainty that a confrontation is the final necessary step in restoring his dominance. Flavio now fully understands that the idea of separation was always an illusion. There was never a point where he stood outside this conflict looking in. Everything that has happened was part of the unfolding reality, even the moments that felt still or peaceful. That realization no longer arrives as shock. It settles as understanding, becoming part of how he sees everything around him. The world that surrounds the village has now reached a point where nothing feels separate anymore. The distinction between ordinary life and the rising threat has fully dissolved, leaving behind a single continuous reality where everything feels connected to the underlying music force. What once felt like scattered signs of disturbance has now formed, music, into a complete pattern, clear enough that it can no longer be dismissed, yet still unfolding in ways that are not fully visible. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr., now exists, music, in complete alignment with this unfolding reality. The sword he forged is no longer something he questions or interprets. It has become a constant presence that shapes how he perceives everything around him. When he holds it, there is a steady clarity that removes hesitation entirely. It does not provide comfort or reassurance, but instead enforces music awareness, making it impossible to ignore the direction in which events are moving. The village continues its outward existence, but internally it has already changed. People still follow their routines, yet everything feels so slightly disconnected, as if they are participating in a version of life that is slowly being overtaken by something unseen. Conversations are quieter, pauses are longer, and attention is constantly drawn toward things that cannot be explained. It is not panic. Ida is recognition without words. Beyond the visible world, Lizardo's presence has become fully defined in purpose. The darkness he represents is no longer expanding randomly or testing boundaries. It is now focused entirely on resolution. His awareness of Flavio and the sword has become absolute, shaping every thought and action toward a final confrontation. There is no longer observation or delay, only preparation for direct conflict that he considers inevitable. Flavio begins to understand more deeply that the separation he once believed in never truly existed. There was never a point where he stood outside this conflict. Only moments that gave the illusion of distance. Everything that has happened was part of a single continuous unfolding leading directly to the stage. Even silence and calm were only parts of the same process moving toward completion. The sword continues to reflect this understanding in its own silent way. Music, it does not change, but its presence feels increasingly connected to the shifting balance between opposing forces. It becomes a constant reminder that what is happening is not something approaching from outside, it is something already happening within the same reality he occupies. The boundary between awareness and involvement no longer exists. The villagers, still unaware of the full truth, continue to rely on Flavio in ways they cannot fully express. There is no formal recognition, but in the moments of uncertainty, their attention naturally turns toward him. He has become the center around which music and their unspoken expectations gather, not by choice, but by the nature of what I see unfolding around them. And at this final stage of realization, one truth becomes unavoidable. There is no longer a moment of arrival left. Everything that was coming has already arrived in full form. And now there is only the continuation of what is already in motion, leading directly into the final confrontation that cannot be avoided. The final convergence of events arrives not with a single dramatic explosion but with the complete realization that everything has already reached its end point. The world around the village no longer feels like it is preparing for a change. It feels like it is fully into it. Every trace of normal life now exists only as a fading layer over a deeper reality that has already taken control. What remains is not anticipation but presence. The presence of a conflict that has fully formed and can no longer be avoided. Flavio, portrayed by Fernando Poe Jr, now stands at the center of this completed transformation. The sword he forged is no longer a symbol of possibility or a warning. It has become a fully realized force within the reality he inhabits. When he holds it, there is no longer uncertainty or hesitation. There is only a clarity, absolute and undeniable, that at the moment he has been moving toward has already arrived. The blade does not guide him forward anymore. It confirms where he already is. The village itself feels like it is suspended inside this final state. People continue to move, speak, and exist, but everything feels so secondary to the overwhelming awareness that something irreversible has taken a hold. The sense of normal time has collapsed into a single continuous moment where everything feels connected to the same unfolding truth. Even a silence now feels like part of that truth, not a break from it. Beyond what can be seen, Lizardo's presence has reached its final expression of intent. The darkness is no longer expanding, no longer preparing. It is now fully aligned toward confrontation. His awareness of Flavio and the sword has become absolute, and his actions are no longer exploratory, but decisive. There is no longer a search for advantage or understanding. There is only the certainty that opposing forces must now meet directly. Flavio fully understands at this stage that there was never a separation between his life and this conflict. Every moment that felt distant, Every phase that felt uncertain was part of the same continuous path leading to this exact point. The illusion of delay has completely disappeared. What remains is the recognition that he has been inside this reality from the very beginning, even when it seemed otherwise. The Saurda reflects this final understanding into silence. It does not change, but its presence feels complete. No longer connected to movement or anticipation, but to fulfillment of purpose. It exists now as part of the same reality that Hasa fully unfolded, reinforcing the understanding that the balance between opposing forces has reached a conclusion point. The villagers, still without full comprehension of what Hasa truly occurred, exist within the aftermath of realization, without having witnessed the entire journey. Their reliance on Flavio, once subtle and unspoken, now feels absolute in its natural form. He is no longer just the center of attention. He is the only remaining point of stability within a world that has already shifted beyond its original form. And within this final moment of clarity, one truth becomes permanent. There is no longer a future point where everything will begin.